It's happening, guys. Moderates are waking up to single payer healthcare, or at least to the idea of Medicare for all. Why do I say this? I'm not just referring to Marjorie Taylor Greene's praise of other countries having Medicare for all, which in turn plants the seeds for the Overton window to shift and to gain more acceptance of that idea nationally. It's not just conservative Republicans like her, it's also moderates, liberals throughout the country are finally realizing that the current system that we have is absolute dog shit. The current healthcare system, where the profit motive is the driving force in healthcare and health insurance, it has quickly turned into a true dystopia where millions of Americans can't afford healthcare. They certainly can't afford insurance. Single payer healthcare is labeled as socialist, even though countries throughout the developed world, especially throughout most of Europe, have wonderful, thriving single payer healthcare systems. Some countries like Italy have a system where they do have single payer healthcare, but they also have the private option. It's there if you want it. In the rest of the developed world, single payer healthcare is seen as a right. It's seen as common sense. It is not seen as extreme or far left. America is the last frontier on the dystopian idea of for-profit healthcare. But like I said, the Overton window has slowly been shifting, and here is a great example of that. I mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mentioned that some moderates, some liberals, and even some right-leaning political figures have come out in support of at least implementing Medicare for all. There's a guy by the name of Gene Marks. He's a columnist, and he's written pieces for the Washington Times, The Guardian, New York Times, The Hill, and many other agencies. Gene is a regular guest on Fox Business, MSNBC, and other outlets where he talks about technology, economic, financial issues. This guy has recently described himself as capitalist as they get. This is a pretty big deal here. He recently wrote an article for The Guardian. The title is, "I'm as capitalist as they get, but Medicare for all is the best hope for U.S. healthcare." He says, with the U.S. government shutdown over impending rises to insurance premiums, it's clear the status quo cannot continue. I'm sure everyone knows by now, and I've made several videos about this issue. The government is set to reopen, and the Democrats just held a 40-day protest, essentially, keeping the government closed. They tried to use the government shutdown as leverage to extend the ACA tax credits for the 20 million plus Americans who use the government healthcare program. If those tax subsidies are not extended, premiums are going to double and in some cases triple. I read through the article and it really blew me away what he has to say. This guy who is a self-proclaimed as capitalist as they come. It's a pretty short article, but I'm not going to read word for word. Here's the quick summary though. He starts off by saying deductibles, in-network, out-of-network, concierge medical services, out-of-pocket, co-payment, co-insurance, ACA, HMO, PPO. Like, he starts to name all of these terms. And he says, confused? You should be. Who understands all this stuff? And then he goes on to say, our healthcare system isn't just complicated, it's expensive. According to a recent study from research firm KFF, the average family pays $27,000 annually for their health insurance, up 6% from last year. So he goes on to explain that health insurance is just way too unaffordable for too many Americans. And here's the revelation that he had. He said, I'm not proposing national health care. I'm proposing that our already existing Medicare system and insurance system simply expand to cover everyone. This idea, Medicare for all, has already been introduced so many times by Bernie Sanders and others. We already have a Medicare system in which people pay a little bit into, and what they get is free coverage or next to nothing in cost at the point of service. This centrist figure, this capitalist through and through guy, is advocating to expand our Medicare program to everyone. And then he goes into some of the numbers. He says a national health insurance program, which would be, a fully covered Medicare, for example, would require contributions from both employees and employers, kind of like how it is now. In the UK, who has single payer healthcare, the NHS. In the UK, an employee making £60,000, which is about $78,000, must contribute £3,211 to their healthcare, which is about 5.3% of their income. So 5.3% of their income goes towards healthcare, and it covers just about everything. Just 5.3% of their income goes towards everything being free at the point of service. So Gene says, does this seem like a lot? Not if you compare that with what the typical American pays. He said he knows people who are easily contributing 8 to 15% of their employee wages for their healthcare costs. Later on, he goes on to say, I'm as capitalist as they get, but I've learned that government has a significant role in our lives, from providing defense to funding needed infrastructure Providing healthcare to all through a national insurance system strengthens our economy's infrastructure. At the end of the article, he says we, as in the US, ranks 15th and 69th among countries with the best healthcare in the world, according to 2 separate studies. If you take the average of both of those numbers, we're ranked somewhere in the mid 40s. That's unacceptable. The US, the richest country in the history of this world, and we are somewhere in the 40s or higher, depending on what study you look at, as far as best healthcare in the world. And it sounds like that this centrist, this capitalist through and through, is implying that Medicare for all is the only way that we can get to where we need to be, which is having affordable healthcare for everybody. I think Medicare for all is a great step. It's much better than the current system that we have. I think we can do better than Medicare for all. It might be the easiest to implement since we already have a Medicare system that covers millions of Americans, and it would be as simple as every 5 or 10 years or however long you want it to be, you push the window of coverage further and further. So let's say, I've heard this argument before, let's say the first year that Medicare is expanded, it covers everyone 50 and older. And then let's say 5 years later, it covers everyone 40 and older. 5 years after that, it covers everyone 30, and then so on and so on. What that does is it gives us time for the logistics of expanding Medicare. That would be the easiest way to transition. Now, unfortunately, that's a 15, 20, 30-year project that unfortunately not every administration is going to be down for. Who knows? We might have another Trump come in after 8 years of another Democratic president, and he completely destroys the system. Who knows? I've read some studies on this. That slow transition of every few years you expand the window of coverage, that might take too long because another fascist dictator might come in and try to just blow it all up. So instead of a Medicare for all, I would advocate for a true single payer system. I have a couple of videos on that if you want to go check it out. Unfortunately, we had to get to this moment in history where too many Americans have to choose between getting health insurance, between getting their prescription medications, or being able to afford rent. Food. Too many Americans can't afford all of these things. And when the private market doesn't do its job to make things affordable, which they're not incentivized to, that's the problem with capitalism, is that the free market is not incentivized to make things affordable. The free market is incentivized to make as much profit as possible. The only way to do that is to squeeze every penny from consumers. But I think this is a good sign that this Gene Marx, not to be confused with Karl Marx, a guy who labels himself as capitalist as they come, and he's out here advocating for Medicare for all. I think this is a great strategy to use. Label yourself as a capitalist, but not for healthcare. What they should be saying is, look, I'm as capitalist as they come, but healthcare is a human right. Healthcare is life or death. People shouldn't have to pay for it at the point of service. It should be paid for already on the back end through our taxes, taxing the wealthy, so that no one can get denied life-saving treatment and prescription drugs. I feel like this is just so common sense. Other developed nations have figured this shit out decades ago. I think the Overton window is slowly shifting in the right direction here, at least with healthcare. We do need more people out there advocating for this, though. It can't just be leftists. It can't just be a few rogue conservatives, but we have to be louder about this. And we can't let other things in the news distract us from the mission, which is making things affordable for the average American, for everyday middle class, lower income Americans. And this is one way we can do that.